January 5, 1943. Outside Osnabrück, Germany. The air hung heavy with frost as Sergeant Wilhelm Braun stood watch over the labor camp perimeter, his breath forming clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he patrolled, certain that today would be like every other dreary winter day since his assignment to this remote camp 2 years prior. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What unfolds over the next 72 hours would transform not only the lives of those involved, but would challenge everything they believed about humanity, loyalty, and the true meaning of courage during mankind's darkest hour. The labor camp near Osnabrück was not among the most notorious of the era, but it served its purpose efficiently. Designated primarily for skilled laborers, prisoners were tasked with manufacturing components for the German war machine. The camp housed approximately 800 prisoners, most of whom were political dissidents, resistors, and approximately 200 Jewish individuals with specialized skills deemed temporarily valuable to the German production efforts. Sergeant Wilhelm Braun had not volunteered for this assignment. At 38 years old, he was considered too old for frontline duty, but too valuable to waste in civilian life. Before the war, he had been a respected mechanical engineer in Stuttgart, with a reputation for solving complex problems. His technical knowledge made him useful at the camp, where he oversaw production quality and maintained the fragile balance between output quotas and the deteriorating condition of the prisoner workforce. That January morning, Braun completed his rounds and headed toward the administrative building. The camp commandant, Major Klaus Hoffmann, had called for an early meeting. At 46, Hoffmann was a career military man who ran the camp with calculated precision. He was neither the cruelest nor the most lenient of commanders, but rather a methodical bureaucrat who viewed the camp as a production facility to be optimized. "Attention!" called out Lieutenant Dieter Weber as Braun and 4 other officers entered the commandant's office. At 26, Weber was the youngest officer in the camp leadership and by far the most zealous adherent to the ideological principles of the regime. "At ease, gentlemen," Hoffmann said, not looking up from the papers on his desk. "New directives have arrived from Berlin. Our camp has been selected for immediate reassignment." The officers exchanged glances. Reassignment usually meant one thing: prisoners being transferred to camps further east, which everyone understood to be a death sentence for most. "Beginning tomorrow," Hoffmann continued, "we will begin processing all Jewish prisoners for transport. Technical skills are no longer considered sufficient reason for exemption. All Jewish prisoners will be sent east within 72 hours. Braun felt his stomach tighten. While he had never openly questioned orders, he had witnessed enough over the past 2 years to harbor private doubts about the system he served. Among the prisoners whose work he supervised was David Abramovich, a 34-year-old engineer from Prague, whose brilliance had made him indispensable to the manufacturing operation. Abramovich had designed modifications to the machinery that increased production by 30% while using fewer raw materials. This accomplishment had previously earned him special status and slightly better treatment. "Sergeant Braun," Hoffmann addressed him directly, "your production team will need reorganization. Prepare recommendations for prisoner reassignment to maintain output levels after the transfers." "Yes, Major," Braun responded automatically. "When should I have this completed?" "By this evening. The first transports leave tomorrow at 0600 hours. As the meeting concluded, Lieutenant Weber approached Braun in the hallway. "I will be personally overseeing the selection process for your workshop," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "I know some of these men have made themselves useful, but orders are orders." Braun nodded stiffly and made his way to the workshop. The morning shift was already underway, with prisoners working silently at their stations. David Abramovich was hunched over a drafting table, making calculations for a new component design. Seeing him, Braun was struck by a disturbing thought. In 3 days, this brilliant mind would be destroyed, not for any crime, not for any military necessity, but simply because of who he was born to be. That evening, after completing the prisoner reassignment documents, Braun sat alone in his quarters. The small room offered little comfort, a narrow bed, a desk, and a small wood stove that struggled against the January cold. On his desk lay the personnel file for David Abramovich. According to the records, Abramovich had been a professor of engineering at Charles University before the war. He had a wife and daughter who had already been sent east 2 years earlier. There had never been any correspondence. Braun had never considered himself a brave man. He had accepted his military assignment without protest. He had witnessed the gradual implementation of increasingly harsh policies without speaking out. He had told himself he was simply doing his duty, following orders, surviving like everyone else. But something about the impending fate of Abramovich struck him differently. In the early hours of the morning, Braun made a decision that would alter the course of multiple lives. If asked later, he could never fully explain his motivation, whether it was a sudden moral awakening, a specific admiration for Abramovich's brilliance, or simply the cumulative weight of 2 years of witnessed injustices. Whatever the reason, Sergeant Wilhelm Braun decided to act. The next morning, Braun arrived at the workshop before dawn. He found Abramovich already there, working by lamplight. "You are here early, Professor," Braun said quietly, using the title that was forbidden in the camp. Abramovich looked up, surprised both by Braun's presence and his use of the honorific. "I wish to complete the calibration specifications before the day's work begins, Sergeant." Braun closed the door behind him. "You know what is happening today?" Abramovich's eyes revealed that he did. News traveled quickly through the camp, even when officially withheld. "Yes, Sergeant. I understand there will be transports." "You are on the list," Braun said flatly. Abramovich nodded slowly. "I have been expecting it. I'm only surprised it took this long." There was no fear in his voice, only resignation. "I have a proposal," Braun said, lowering his voice further. "It is dangerous for both of us, but it may give you a chance." For the first time, a flicker of something other than resignation crossed Abramovich's face. "What kind of proposal, Sergeant?" "There is a storage space beneath the workshop floor, a maintenance pit for the larger machinery. It is rarely used now that the newer equipment has been installed. You could hide there temporarily." "And then what?" Abramovich asked. "Even if I avoid the transport, where would I go? How would I survive?" "One step at a time," Braun replied. "First, we need to get through the next 72 hours. After the transports leave, there will be confusion, reassignments. Possibilities may open up." Abramovich studied Braun's face, searching for any sign of deception. "Why would you risk this for me, Sergeant? You could be severely punished." It was a question Braun had asked himself repeatedly during his sleepless night. "Perhaps I am tired of being a coward," he finally answered. "Perhaps I see no military necessity in destroying a brilliant mind. Choose whichever explanation gives you more confidence in my resolve." After a moment of consideration, Abramovich nodded. "When do we begin?" "Now," Braun said. "The first collection begins in 1 hour. Let me show you the space." Braun led Abramovich to the back of the workshop, where a large metal plate was set into the concrete floor. Using a pry bar, he lifted the heavy cover to reveal a maintenance pit, approximately 6 feet deep, 8 feet long, and 3 feet wide. It contained old tools, spare parts, and enough space for a man to lie down or sit. "It will be uncomfortable," Braun acknowledged, "and there is the risk of discovery during inspections, but it offers a chance." Abramovich looked at the dark space. "How will I breathe? How will I eat?" "There are ventilation channels built into the sides, designed to clear engine fumes when maintenance was performed. They are small but sufficient. As for food and water, I will bring what I can each night." Abramovich descended into the pit, and Braun handed down a blanket and a small canteen of water. "Remember, absolute silence is essential, especially during the day when the workshop is occupied. I will return when I can." Before replacing the cover, Braun hesitated. "Professor, I cannot guarantee your safety. This may only postpone the inevitable." "In times like these, Sergeant, postponing the inevitable is itself a form of victory," Abramovich replied with unexpected calm. "I accept the risks." Braun lowered the metal cover back into place, making sure it fit securely. He then carefully arranged tools and equipment over it to make it appear undisturbed. Just as he finished, the workshop door opened, and Lieutenant Weber entered with 2 armed guards. "Sergeant Braun, you are here early," Weber observed, his tone suggesting suspicion. "Final production adjustments, Lieutenant," Braun replied, keeping his voice steady. "With the transfers today, I wanted to ensure continuity of operations." Weber nodded, seemingly satisfied. "We are here for the preliminary collection. Where is prisoner Abramovich? His name is first on the list for this section." Braun gestured around the empty workshop. "He has not arrived yet. Prisoners are not scheduled to begin work for another 30 minutes. "That is odd," Weber said, consulting his clipboard. "According to the night guards, he left the barracks over an hour ago, claiming he had special permission to work early." Weber's eyes narrowed. "Did you grant such permission, Sergeant?" "No, Lieutenant," Braun lied smoothly. "Perhaps he misunderstood the production schedule I posted yesterday. He may be in another section of the camp." Weber was clearly displeased. "Find him, Sergeant. I want him processed with the first group." He turned to the guards. "Search the entire building, and then expand to the yard and adjacent facilities." After Weber and his men departed, Braun exhaled slowly. The deception had begun, and already complications had arisen. If Abramovich could not be found, a camp-wide alert would be issued. Braun needed to provide an explanation that would satisfy the search without revealing the truth. As the workshop filled with prisoners for the morning shift, Braun maintained his routine with forced normalcy. He assigned tasks, inspected work, and gave instructions as though it were any other day. Meanwhile, across the camp, the first groups of Jewish prisoners were being assembled for transport. Through the windows, Braun could see people being marched toward the train platform that had been built specifically for this purpose. By midday, Lieutenant Weber returned, his face flushed with anger. "Abramovich is nowhere to be found. He is not in the barracks, the infirmary, or any work detail. This means only one thing: he has attempted to escape." "That seems unlikely, Lieutenant," Braun countered. "The perimeter is secure, and Abramovich has never shown any signs of resistance. Perhaps there is a clerical error, or he has been misidentified in another group." "I want a complete search of this workshop," Weber demanded. "Every corner, every container, every possible hiding place." Braun felt a cold sweat form on his back but maintained his composure. "Of course, Lieutenant. I will assist in any way I can." For the next hour, Weber directed his men in a thorough search of the workshop. They opened cabinets, moved equipment, and checked the rafters. When they approached the maintenance pit, Braun intervened. "Lieutenant, that access point has been sealed since last spring, he explained. "We replaced the old machinery with the new models that require less underground maintenance. The pit below is filled with construction debris from the renovation." Weber hesitated, looking at the heavy metal plate with tools carefully arranged around it. "Open it anyway," he ordered. Braun's mind raced. "It would take some time, sir." The plate was sealed with industrial adhesive to prevent fumes from the debris affecting the workshop air. "We would need special tools from the maintenance division." Weber checked his watch impatiently. "We don't have time for this. The first transport leaves in 20 minutes, and I must account for all prisoners." He made a notation on his clipboard. "I am recording Abramovich as an escape attempt. The commandant will issue a camp-wide alert, and the local police will be notified." After Weber left, Braun continued supervising the day's work, while anxiety gnawed at him. An escape alert meant increased security throughout the camp and surrounding areas. It would make his plan to help Abramovich even more dangerous. That evening, after the prisoners had been returned to their barracks and the night shift guards had taken their positions, Braun made his way back to the workshop. He carried a small package containing bread, cheese, and a flask of water hidden inside his coat. The camp was unusually active, with search parties and additional guards patrolling the perimeter in response to the supposed escape. Inside the darkened workshop, Braun worked quickly to remove the tools covering the maintenance pit. He lifted the metal plate just enough to whisper, "Professor, are you all right?" "Yes," came the barely audible reply. "What is happening outside?" "They believe you have escaped. There is a search underway, but no one suspects you are here." Braun passed the food and water through the narrow opening. "I cannot stay long. The patrols are frequent tonight." "Thank you," Abramovich whispered. "Sergeant, may I ask you something?" "Quickly," Braun urged. "Do you have a family?" The question caught Braun off guard. I did. My wife left me in 39 when I received my military assignment. My son is with her in Switzerland. I see, Abramovich said softly. I was wondering what made a man risk everything for a stranger. We should not speak of this now, Braun said, uncomfortable with the personal turn of the conversation. I will return tomorrow night. As he replaced the cover and rearranged the tools, Braun heard the workshop door open. He froze, then forced himself to turn casually, as though conducting a routine check. It was Helena Müller, the camp secretary who maintained production records. At 30, she was one of the few women employed at the camp in an administrative capacity. Her usual demeanor was efficient and distant, but now she stood watching Braun with undisguised suspicion. "Working late, Sergeant?" she asked, her voice neutral but her eyes sharp. "Final adjustments to the production schedule," Braun replied, moving away from the maintenance pit. "With 20% of our workforce being transported, I need to recalibrate our output projections." Helena closed the door behind her. "That's interesting because I have already revised those projections at Major Hoffman's request." She took a step closer. "What are you really doing here?" "Sergeant Braun." Braun considered his options. Denial seemed pointless. Helena was too observant. Threatening her would only confirm her suspicions. The truth was dangerous, but perhaps the only viable choice. "I think you already know, Fräulein Müller," he said quietly. "Abramovich," she stated rather than asked. "He's here somewhere, isn't he?" Braun remained silent, which was answer enough. Helena moved further into the room, her expression unreadable. "I processed his transport paperwork myself this morning. When he couldn't be found, Lieutenant Weber was furious." She paused. "You do realize what will happen to you if you are discovered?" "I am aware of the consequences," Braun acknowledged. "The question is, what do you intend to do with this information?" Helena looked around the workshop, her gaze lingering on the maintenance pit before returning to Braun. "My brother was a doctor in Berlin," she said, seemingly changing the subject. "In 38, he treated a Jewish child with pneumonia when no one else would. He was reported by a colleague. I haven't seen him since." Braun waited, understanding that she was telling him something important. "I keep this place running efficiently," Helena continued. "I maintain perfect records. I am above suspicion." She straightened her shoulders. "Which means I am in a position to help if I choose to." "Help?" Braun repeated, uncertain whether to trust this unexpected development. "You have no plan beyond hiding him, do you?" Helena asked. "That is not enough. Even if he avoids the transports, what then? He cannot remain in that pit indefinitely." "I am working on that part," Braun admitted. Helena shook her head slightly. "You need assistance, Sergeant. Fortunately for you, I may be able to provide it." She reached into her pocket and removed a small key. "This opens the records office. Inside my desk. Bottom drawer, there is a false bottom. You will find blank identification papers and travel permits." Braun stared at her, stunned by the revelation. "You've been preparing for something like this?" "Let's just say I believe in contingency planning," Helena replied. "I have been collecting these materials for over a year. I never knew if I would use them or for whom. But I believe Professor Abramovich's mind is worth preserving." "How did you know about his background?" Braun asked. "I process all prisoner intake forms. I remember being impressed by his credentials." Helena handed Braun the key. "The second transport leaves tomorrow evening. The final one the following morning. After that, security will decrease as the camp returns to normal operations with a reduced population. That will be your window of opportunity." Before Braun could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor prompted Helena to step away quickly. She moved to the production board just as the door opened, revealing a night guard on his rounds. "Evening inspection," the guard announced, then noticed Helena. "Fräulein Müller, Sergeant Braun, I didn't expect anyone here at this hour." "Just finalizing the revised production quotas," Helena explained smoothly. "With the workforce adjustments, we need to ensure continuity of output." The guard nodded, conducted a cursory inspection of the workshop and departed. Neither Braun nor Helena spoke until they were certain he was gone. "Tomorrow night," Helena whispered. "Meet me at the records office at 2200 hours. We will prepare what is needed." After she left, Braun knelt beside the maintenance pit and softly tapped the metal cover. "Professor, can you hear me?" "Yes," came Abramovich's muffled reply. "There have been developments. I may have found help. Hold on for another day." The next morning brought increased tension throughout the camp. The second transport was being prepared, and security remained heightened due to Abramovich's supposed escape. Commandant Hoffman had issued orders for all personnel to be vigilant, and rewards were promised for information leading to the capture of the missing prisoner. Lieutenant Weber seemed particularly determined to find Abramovich. "It reflects poorly on camp security," he complained to Braun during an inspection. "Berlin does not tolerate such failures." "Perhaps he never actually escaped," Braun suggested carefully. "He could have been injured somewhere on the grounds, fallen into a drainage ditch, or become trapped in a storage area." "That possibility is being explored," Weber said. "Teams are checking all infrastructure elements. If he is on the grounds, dead or alive, he will be found." Throughout the day, Braun divided his attention between supervising the increasingly short-handed workshop and monitoring the search activities. Several times, teams came to re-inspect the workshop, but none paid special attention to the maintenance pit, which remained undisturbed beneath its layer of tools and equipment. As evening approached, Braun grew increasingly anxious about his meeting with Helena. He had no reason to trust her completely, yet he had few alternatives. If she was setting a trap, both he and Abramovich would be doomed. If she was sincere, she represented their best hope for a viable escape plan. At 2200 hours, Braun made his way cautiously to the administration building. The camp was quieter now. The second transport had departed an hour earlier, taking with it nearly 100 prisoners. Guards were focused primarily on the perimeter, making movement within the central area slightly easier. The records office was dark when Braun arrived. He used Helena's key to enter, then closed the door silently behind him. The room was filled with filing cabinets, typewriters, and stacks of papers, the administrative heart of the camp's operations. "You came," Helena's voice emerged from the shadows at the back of the room. She stepped forward, her face partially illuminated by moonlight through the window. "Did you doubt I would?" Braun asked. "I thought you might reconsider the risk," she admitted. "Many would have." Helena moved to her desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. As she had described, the drawer had a false bottom which she carefully removed to reveal a collection of official-looking papers, stamps, and blank identification cards. "These are authentic form, she explained, "requisitioned through official channels, but never used due to clerical errors that I created. With the proper information and seals, they will pass inspection at most checkpoints." "How did you obtain the seals?" Braun asked, impressed by her thoroughness. "The benefit of being responsible for supply inventory," Helena said with a slight smile. "Items occasionally get misplaced in bureaucratic systems." For the next hour, they worked together, creating a new identity for David Abramovich. He would become Daniel Albrecht, a mechanical engineer from Stuttgart, with authorization to travel to industrial sites for technical consultation. Braun provided details about Stuttgart that would help Abramovich maintain the deception if questioned. "He will need different clothing," Helena pointed out, "and money for travel." "I have some civilian clothes in my quarters," Braun said, "and about 200 Reichsmarks saved." "I can contribute another 300, Helena offered. "It should be enough to reach Switzerland if he is careful." "Switzerland?" Braun asked. "Is that possible?" "There are sympathetic contacts in Freiburg who can guide travelers across the border," Helena explained. "My brother used a similar route." She hesitated. "Which brings me to the most difficult part of this plan. Someone must accompany him at least as far as Freiburg. A Jewish man traveling alone, regardless of his papers, will attract suspicion. He needs an escort." Braun understood the implication. "You mean me?" "You are the logical choice," Helena confirmed. "As a sergeant, your travel would not be questioned, especially if you have orders assigning you to inspect industrial facilities. We can create those as well. If I disappear at the same time as Abramovich's escape is discovered, the connection will be obvious," Braun pointed out. "That is why we must create a diversion," Helena said, "something that will confuse the timeline and the circumstances." They continued planning late into the night, considering various scenarios and addressing potential complications. By the time they finished, they had created not only identification papers for Abramovich, but travel orders for Braun and a detailed escape route with alternatives in case of problems. "Tomorrow morning is the final transport," Helena reminded him as they prepared to leave. "After that, we implement the plan. Are you certain you want to proceed? Once committed, there is no turning back." Braun thought about the comfortable life he had left behind in Stuttgart, his engineering career, his estranged wife and son in Switzerland. He thought about the past 2 years at the camp and the gradual erosion of his self-respect. As he followed orders, he increasingly questioned. "I'm certain," he said finally. "Whatever happens, at least I will have made one choice I can live with." The following morning, the final transport preparations created a flurry of activity throughout the camp. Braun used this distraction to visit the workshop briefly and speak to Abramovich. "Tonight," he whispered through the barely lifted cover of the maintenance pit. "Be ready at midnight. Wear these." He passed down a bundle containing civilian clothes, the forged identification papers, and a small map. "You have accomplished all this?" Abramovich asked, his voice revealing both gratitude and disbelief. "Not alone," Braun admitted, "but the details must wait. Conserve your strength. The journey ahead will be demanding." Throughout the day, Braun continued his duties as normally as possible while finalizing preparations. He packed a small bag with essential items, secured his savings, and memorized the route they would need to take. Helena, meanwhile, implemented her part of the plan. At 1800 hours, the camp alarm suddenly sounded. Guards rushed toward the eastern perimeter, where smoke was rising from one of the storage buildings. In the confusion, Braun slipped away to his quarters to change into civilian clothes beneath his uniform. The fire had been Helena's idea, a controlled blaze in a non-essential facility that would create chaos without endangering lives. The timing was perfect. With the final transport gone and the evening approaching, the camp's routine was already disrupted. At 23:30, Braun made his final approach to the workshop. The camp was still in a state of controlled disorder, with guards divided between normal security duties and fire containment. Using his authority as sergeant, Braun had little trouble reaching the workshop unchallenged. Inside, he worked quickly to remove the covering from the maintenance pit. "Professor, it's time," he called softly. Abramovich emerged slowly, stiff from 3 days in the confined space. He was already wearing the civilian clothes Braun had provided, a simple wool suit that was slightly too large but serviceable. Despite his discomfort, his eyes were alert and determined. "The identification papers are in the inner pocket," Braun instructed. "Memorize all the details. From this moment forward, you are Daniel Albrecht, mechanical engineer from Stuttgart. I am Wilhelm Braun. Your colleague. We are traveling to inspect industrial equipment in Karlsruhe." "How will we leave the camp?" Abramovich asked, stretching his cramped limbs. "Through the service gate on the north side," Braun explained. "Helena, Fräulein Müller, has arranged for the guard to be temporarily reassigned due to the fire emergency. We have approximately 10 minutes to reach the gate and pass through before the regular patrol resumes." They moved cautiously through the camp, keeping to shadows and using buildings as cover. The fire, though now contained, still drew attention away from their movement. As they approached the north gate, Braun saw it was indeed unguarded, just as Helena had promised. "Once we're outside, we walk half a mile to the road," Braun whispered. "A truck makes a regular delivery to the nearby village at this hour. The driver has been paid to take on passengers without questions." They passed through the gate and into the dark forest beyond. The January night was bitterly cold, their breath visible in the moonlight. Behind them, the camp's searchlights swept across the grounds, oblivious to their escape. After 20 minutes of difficult travel through the underbrush, they reached the road. As predicted, a truck approached, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Braun gave a prearranged signal with his flashlight, and the vehicle slowed to a stop. The driver, an elderly man with a weathered face, barely looked at them as they climbed into the back among crates of produce. "Freiburg?" he asked simply. "Yes," Braun confirmed, passing him an envelope containing payment arranged by Helena. As the truck rumbled to life and began moving away from the camp, Abramovich turned to Braun. "Why are you doing this? You had security, position. Now you will be hunted." Braun considered the question. "I had security at the cost of my humanity," he finally said. "That is no security at all." They rode in silence for several miles, each man lost in his thoughts. The truck would take them as far as the next town, where they would catch an early morning train to continue their journey. If all went according to plan, they would reach Freiburg in 2 days, and then the Swiss border soon after. "What will you do if we reach Switzerland?" Abramovich asked eventually. "My son is there with his mother," Braun replied. "I have not seen him in 4 years. He would be 9 now." He paused. "Beyond that, I have no specific plan." "I have an uncle in Zurich," Abramovich said. "If he survived, he might help us establish ourselves." He looked at Braun with newfound respect. A German sergeant and a Jewish prisoner. People would never believe such traveling companions could exist. "Perhaps that is part of our advantage," Braun suggested. "People see what they expect to see, not what is actually before them." Back at the camp, it would be hours before anyone realized that Sergeant Wilhelm Braun was missing. By the time Lieutenant Weber connected his disappearance with the supposed escape of Abramovich, the 2 men would be well on their journey. Helena Müller would express appropriate shock at the development while quietly removing any evidence of her involvement. The truck continued through the night, carrying its unusual passengers toward an uncertain future. Neither man had any illusions about the difficulties that lay ahead. The war would continue, the suffering would persist, their individual actions would not change the course of history or save the millions already lost. Yet, in this small act of defiance against a system built on hatred and fear, something profound had occurred. A choice had been made that affirmed the value of a single human life. A risk had been taken based on the belief that moral courage matters, even, perhaps especially, in the darkest of times. As dawn approached, Abramovich broke the long silence. "If we survive this, Sergeant, I would like to know more about mechanical engineering in Stuttgart. It seems I will need to become convincing as Daniel Albrecht." "And I would be interested to learn about your work at Charles University," Braun replied. After all, colleagues should know each other's background. For the first time in many days, perhaps years, both men found themselves smiling, not from happiness exactly, but from the strange and unexpected discovery of humanity in the most inhuman of circumstances. The truck slowed as it approached a small town, just awakening to the new day. Their immediate journey was ending, but the greater journey was just beginning. As they prepared to disembark, Braun offered his hand to Abramovich. "Daniel," he said, using the new name with deliberate emphasis, "welcome to your second life." Abramovich took the offered hand. "Thank you, Wilhelm," he replied, "for giving me the chance to live it." 3 months later, in a small apartment in Zurich, 2 men sat at a table covered with engineering drawings. Outside the window, spring was transforming the landscape, bringing color back to a world that had endured another winter of war. The older man, now wearing glasses and a neatly trimmed beard that changed his appearance considerably, was explaining a technical concept to his younger companion. "The principle is simple," David Abramovich said, using his real name for the first time in many months. "The efficiency of energy transfer can be improved by redistributing the load across multiple points rather than a single junction." Across the table, a boy of 9 listened with fascination. Beside him, Wilhelm Braun watched his son's engagement with pride. The journey to this moment had been fraught with dangers, checkpoints, suspicious officials, nearly disastrous encounters with former acquaintances. Yet somehow, through a combination of careful planning, Helena's excellent forgeries, and perhaps a measure of luck, they had reached Switzerland. Abramovich had indeed found his uncle, an elderly watchmaker who had emigrated years before the war. The old man had welcomed them without question and helped establish them in the small community of refugees that existed quietly on the margins of Swiss society. Braun had located his ex-wife and son with surprising ease. The meeting had been tense at first, years of separation and the weight of unspoken judgments creating a barrier between them. But the presence of their child, curious, forgiving, and untainted by the adult world's complexities, had provided a bridge back to something resembling family. They were not safe, not completely. The war continued and Switzerland's neutrality was a fragile protection. But they were alive, And each day brought its own small victories. Abramovich's engineering skills had secured him modest employment with a local manufacturing company. Bron was learning watchmaking from the uncle, his engineer's precision serving him well in the delicate work. "Will you tell me again about the camp?" Bron's son asked suddenly, looking up from the drawings. It was a question he had asked several times since learning a simplified version of their journey. "Perhaps another time," Bron said gently. "Today is for building new things, not remembering old ones." The boy accepted this answer and returned his attention to Abramovich's lesson. Bron watched them together, the Jewish professor whose mind he had refused to let be destroyed, and the son he had thought he might never see again. In saving one, he had found a path back to the other. Outside, church bells rang across the city, marking the hour. Inside the apartment, 2 men and a boy continued their work, each of them transformed by choices made in darkness but lived out in gathering light. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.